to come, among them Michael Cohen and Hope Hicks, two former members of Trump's inner circle. And I want to go right now to Sarah Matthews, former Trump White House Deputy Press Secretary. Sarah, good to have you here. It's nice to see you again. So look, you were part of Trump's 2020 campaign. Did Trump's alleged affairs, did they resurface at all during that campaign? Was there any guidance on how to address them if they did come up?
No, that wasn't anything that came up during my time on the 2020 campaign or during my time when I switched over to the White House later that year. So, I have no insight into that whatsoever.
Okay, so but what do you make of the idea that Hope Hicks and Sarah Sanders, while in the White House, might have been part of a strategy, that phone call alleged by David Pecker, to try to decide how you're going to handle Karen McDougal? I mean, just two White House staffers being involved is the question.
Yeah, no, I think when I was working at the White House in the White House press shop, this would be something that I would categorize as unethical behavior. To think that two employees of the White House whose salaries are being paid by taxpayer dollars are in cahoots with a media outlet to try to cover up an affair and involved in a hush money payment scheme, and that they had knowledge of this is definitely quite concerning.
Yeah. How about Hope Hicks? Do you expect her to play a pivotal role in this trial if she's called to testify? Or do you expect her testimony will be similar to that of Rona Graffs, who we heard from very briefly this week, of course, a longtime executive assistant to Donald Trump? What do you expect from Hope?
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see how her testimony plays out if she does end up ultimately testifying. Look, this is someone who was extremely close to Donald Trump. She was with him from the beginning of his campaign and till the end of his administration. I do think that now it's been reported they're not nearly as close as they once were. I don't believe they're in as much communication, but it's hard to imagine that she would be disloyal against him just given how close they were. And I'm curious if her testimony is going to be more so what we've seen from some other kinds of Trump officials in these types of cases where they don't recall the facts and they kind of lean on that line when they're asked about certain things. But I'm hopeful that if she does end up testifying, that she is honest and transparent with the jury.
You're echoing the last statement there. You're echoing what Anthony Scaramucci told me yesterday, who said he thinks she's a lovely girl. He's always had a lot of respect for her and very much anticipates that her attorneys have said, look, you are under oath. You must tell the truth. So you don't think maybe her soul, her heart will be wanting to be disloyal against Donald Trump, but ultimately, what will weigh out if telling the truth presents some damning evidence in court? What do you expect from her?
Hope wasn't someone that I was necessarily close with during my time on the campaign or at the White House, but I think it is really difficult to go against Trump and against MAGA world. Look, I'm someone who's been through it. And, you know, I once felt a sense of loyalty to the former president. He was my former boss. And I can imagine how hard it is and what she must be going through during this time as she kind of weighs what to do. But as you mentioned, she also is probably hearing from her lawyers that she doesn't want to perjure herself. Right. And so it's my hope that she'll be honest and truthful.
So that's what she's going through. What about Trump? Because the Washington Post wrote about Trump's mood last week, saying despite the efforts to schedule dinners with donors, friends, and world leaders, his moods are worse on trial days. They say he's accustomed to near daily rounds of golf, constant stimulation, and cheers when he enters and exits a room at Mar-a-Lago. And now he's enduring mundane court arguments and long stretches without permission to check his phone. How do you, Sarah, think he's reacting behind closed doors?
I think he's showing us in the public when he does these kinds of little press conferences outside the courthouse. Look, he complains about how cold he is and the air conditioning, and he says that he thinks they're doing it on purpose. He complains about having to sit up straight for several hours. He is upset and frustrated that he is not in control, because in this courtroom, he is being treated like any other American would be during the legal process. And he can't grapple with that, and it frustrates him. And so I think that that makes sense that he's having these mood swings. There was something I witnessed at the White House, how his mood could very drastically switch on a moment's notice. And so it doesn't necessarily surprise me. And also that his team is trying to, get him to do these kinds of dinners and fundraisers. That would be a good use of his time. Obviously, he's off the campaign trail when he's in the courtroom, but he still could be doing things in the evenings during those days. But it doesn't necessarily surprise me, though, that he doesn't feel in the mood to necessarily do that. But then it kind of flies in the face of what he's complaining about, too, when he says that because he's having to, go to the courthouse and be on trial, that it takes away from his ability to campaign. But it doesn't seem like he's all that interested in actually campaigning when the one day he had off last week, he spent golfing at Bedminster.
Yeah. Let's pivot to what you did, which was very courageously testify before the January 6th committee. I'm curious your thoughts, Sarah, on how the Supreme Court hearings on presidential immunity played out and the Republican justices who chose to ignore the actual conduct on January 6th that Donald Trump wants immunity for.
Yeah, it was very disheartening to kind of see how those arguments played out, because what we can interpret so far is it seems like that this is going to be delayed. It seems like that Donald Trump, again, is going to catch another break, and they're going to probably send this back to the lower court to try to decide between what is official and non-official acts. And it's really frustrating, because I think that out of all of the cases that Donald Trump faces, this is the most crucial. The charges that he's facing are the most severe. And I believe that this is something that voters need to know before heading into the ballot box for 2024. Look, voters should know whether or not the Republican candidate for 2024 tried to steal an election in 2020. And so I was discouraged to kind of hear what was coming out of the court, and I'm hopeful that maybe that won't be the case, but it seems like this will get delayed further.
I appreciate the word discouraged that you're using, but if I were in your shoes, given what you went through, I mean, you risked a lot to testify. You endured a lot to testify. There was a lot of backlash. Would you feel betrayed if the Supreme Court does what you've suggested they do and what it appears they may do, send it back, delay, delay, delay? I mean, given everything that you sacrificed, is betrayal something you'd feel?
I would say definitely there is a little bit of a sense of betrayal here, but I can't even rest it solely at the feet of the Supreme Court, because I think that there were multiple factors that led us to be in the situation at which we're at today. And I look back and think, well, this all could have been avoided had Senate Republicans had the courage to convict and disqualify Donald Trump in the aftermath of January 6th. Then we wouldn't even be dealing with this. But, unfortunately, that didn't happen. Then I look at someone like Merrick Garland, who kind of dragged his feet and appointing a special counsel. And he really only did so when he felt the pressure from the January 6th Congressional Committee and all of the work that they were doing. And so maybe if he had appointed a special counsel sooner, then we wouldn't be running up against this timeline where this case might not be heard before the 2024 election. And obviously then there's what's going on with the Supreme Court and the decision that they may ultimately make to delay this further. And so there are, I think, multiple things that I look back on, and I'm just, frustrated with the process. Like you said, I certainly sacrificed a lot, but it's not just about me. There are other witnesses who also went before the January 6th committee to, share what they went through and their stories, and faced severe security risks and, difficulties with landing jobs or being able to leave their houses. And it just makes me really sad to think now that this case might not be heard. But I'm really thankful, at least, though, that we had the January 6th congressional hearings for that they shed light on some of this.
Sarah Matthews, I always appreciate speaking with you, your candor, your experience that you're willing to share and live through again and again. Thank you so much. I'll look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.